Hi, this is Chet Gladkowski, and welcome to the fifth in our series on the life of Jacob. And it's a story that we can all look at as people who are broken and have pasts that have influenced our present. Today, we're looking at going 15 rounds with God. Maybe you've watched the Rocky movies, or maybe you like MMA. I don't know if you've ever watched the full length of a fight, but it is an exhausting thing going 15 rounds, so much time and energy, blood, sweat, and tears. It's just amazing. And it's sort of like running a marathon where you run 26 miles and it's a long time. Maybe that's how you feel right now, that you've been running a marathon. You're on that cycle of life and you just can't get off. It's painful, it's lonely, it's exhausting, and it just seems like it's never going to end. Well, that's where Jacob is as he begins the process. He hears his brother is coming and he thinks, uh-oh, I've got a couple of strikes against me uh, for my brother to be reunited with him. The first strike is, remember that he traded his inheritance. Esau gave up his inheritance for a meal. He had the double portion and he gave it to his younger brother Esau. The second strike against him was that he stole the blessing, how he dressed up like his brother Esau, and Jacob stole the blessing from his father, and everybody is really upset and he runs away. And then he fouls the ball off. He goes to Laban. He thinks he's going to marry Rachel and he gets tricked into Leah. He's just had all of these things against him. And now his brother is coming, and he is worried out of his mind. And he sends a messenger ahead to see how his brother's going to receive him. And they come back and they say, well, this is the story. This is the interesting part. Here is the information. We went to your brother Esau, Genesis 32:6 says, and now he is coming to meet you, and with 400 men. Wow, 400 guys are accompanying him. That doesn't sound like a great party. He's thinking they're coming to wipe him out. And Jacob does what you and I would do when we hear this kind of message. We hold a prayer meeting. And his prayer meeting goes like this: O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, Lord, you who said to me, go back to your country and your relatives, and I will make you prosper. I am unworthy of all your kindness and faithfulness you have shown your servant. I had only my staff when I crossed this Jordan, but now I have become two camps. He recounts to God what has happened in his life. He's at the intersection of kindness and faithfulness. He reminds God, he says, you have been kind, you have been faithful. And that's a great way to begin talking with God. If you're not sure what to do, how to start, think about how good and kind he has been. He goes on to say, save me, I pray, from the hand of my brother Esau, for I am afraid he will come and attack me, and also the mothers with their children. He comes right to the point. He says, God, I am afraid. I am just so afraid. He says, I've come to the end of myself. God, I just don't know where to turn. I'm afraid. I'm scared. I don't have the power or the money to get myself out of this jam. So I'm coming to you. He goes on to say to God, but you, God, have said, I will surely make you prosper and make your descendants like the sand of the sea, which cannot be counted. He's reminding God, he said, you promised me. You said you were going to take care of me. You were going to make me prosper. And he comes to exactly the same place you and I come. We come with the internal struggle, the promise of God versus our current circumstances. Have you felt that? You felt like you have the promise of God, but it keeps getting beat up by the circumstances. You got this war going on inside of your head, inside of your heart, inside of our emotions, and that drives us to God because we say, I don't get it, God. You have said these things, and my experience doesn't match up with that. and it brings doubt and fear. This idea of doubt is, I don't know what to make of it. And fear is that inside emotion that says, I'm out of control and I feel like I'm going to get hurt. Have you been there? Lost, confused, unclear, unsure, uncertain? I've been at that intersection many times, and God is there, and Jacob reminds us that we can call out to him, and he sends gifts to his brother. He sends 200 goats, a whole bunch of stuff, and people, and he spaces them out. He sets them in front of him, sort of as a peace offering. He says, I'm sending these things ahead to sort of soften the blow, to soften his heart. And in the midst of all that, Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. This is where we get the picture of Jacob wrestling with God, and he's all alone, and God shows up in some way. Have you ever been there all alone with God? Have you ever been just totally alone and you have started wrestling with God? Maybe it hasn't been a physical wrestling like in this case, but it's a wrestling where we grapple, we wrestle, we get dusty and dirty. I remember growing up wrestling with my brother, and he was always stronger than me. He was much older, and he could always get me in a hold and control me. Well, that's where he is. That's where Jacob is. He's wrestling, but he's the one who won't let go. And when the man saw that he could not overpower Jacob, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that his hip was wrenched out as he wrestled with the man. I don't know if you've ever had a hip injury. I have, and it is awful. You cannot move. There's nothing you can do to alleviate it. I had a degenerating hip and I couldn't sleep. I tossed, I turned, I couldn't take a step, couldn't sit down without pain. This is where Jacob is. He has a hip injury, and there's nothing that will ever be the same. And then the man said to Jacob, let me go, for it is daybreak. Genesis 32:26 says, but Jacob replied, I will not let you go unless you bless me. Here's the idea. Remember when he dressed up like his brother Esau and said he wanted his father to bless him. Here now he's wrestling with this strange man in the middle of the night, and he's saying, I'm not going to let go until you bless me. Life seemed stacked against Jacob. He was in pain and potential death and destruction. The normal thing would be to give up. But Jacob doesn't do that. He holds on and says, I want you to bless me. This is a beautiful picture of what we are to do with God. We are not to offer these prayers with flowers and sugar and ice cream and a cherry on top. No, he says, I'm holding on to you, God. I'm going to hold on until you bless me. That's what we are commanded to do. We have the hole in our heart that says, I am hurt, I am broken, I am out of things, and I'm all alone. God, I'm going to hold on to you. The man asked him, what is your name? Jacob, he answered. Then the man said, your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome. He's saying in this verse, God is pointing to Jacob and saying, you've been wrestling with people for a long time. You've been wrestling with your circumstances for a long time. You've been under the pressure and the fear of life for a long time. And now it's time to let go. It's time to let me take it. It's time to transition from a tripper and a failure, one who's the brunt of all the jokes, the one that people point at and say, well, he's just tripping people, to be someone who struggles, who has exerted himself, but he's been losing up to this point. But now God says, I'm going to make you Israel because you overcome. You endure. It's physical, but it's more. God was saying in the process of becoming an overcomer, it's a lifelong effort, and it's now coming to a success where I'm going to change your name. But it's not necessarily success of how we define it with possessions, power, and prestige. No, it's something different. He says, you've been struggling and fearful of being reunited. You've had all of these fears of the problems of your past. It's now time to face them, Jacob. And I'm changing your name to Israel, one who struggles but has overcome. Which brings up the question, suppose God wanted to change your name. What would it be? What godly qualities is he building into you right now? How do you know that? Where does God want to take you on your spiritual journey? He's been working in your life through the pain of circumstances. Maybe it's the pain of decisions that you've made. Maybe it's the pain of decisions that people have made and you've been in the backwash of it. And now it's time to change your name. To change your name from one of fear, one of distress, one of anger, one of bitterness, one of hiding, saying, I wonder what's going to happen next. He wants to change your name and my name. I remember so clearly walking out, going out to the mailbox one day, and I opened it up and I found a certified letter in there. And in there was a letter from an attorney threatening to sue me for something that I didn't think I was responsible for. A couple of minutes later, I got the post office delivery came to my door, knocked, and I had to sign a form saying I'd received it. I then was receiving threatening emails. Every time I walked out to the post box, I was wondering, is there another letter? I was living under the fear of what people thought of me. I was living under the fear of what they might do to me and do to my family. I was trying to take on more than what I was supposed to do. Rather than crying out to God like Jacob did and holding on to him, I was trying to solve my own problem. I was missing the mark. I was not following how God wanted me to follow him. I eventually had to go to God convicted of this and saying, God, I'm trying to fix this life myself. Forgive me. This is one of the reasons why you went to the cross in Jesus. Now, I would like to tell you that it left immediately. It didn't. But over time of taking this, I would go to the mailbox. I say, God, the fear would well up inside of me. And I say, this belongs to you. I'm going to become someone who has wrestled with God, and I'm giving it over to you. The fear has passed. I'm now free of it. Maybe you need some freedom from fear. Maybe you need freedom from your past. Maybe you need freedom from someone else's past or present. God says, come to me. He says, just like Jacob, we come, we hold on to God, and we won't let go. Will you do that? Will you start the process of holding on to God, wrestling with him? And this is not praying like, dear Jesus, meek and mild. No, this is wrestling. This is exerting energy. This is crying out to God with your heart and your voice and everything that's in you. Where do we come off thinking God doesn't know it anyway? We're just revealing to him what he already knows. And he's willing to receive us. We know that because Jesus rose from the dead as the proof positive that what he did was acceptable to God and made you and I acceptable to him. Would you pray with me? Our Father and our God, I thank you for your kindness and love of being willing to allow us to bring to you our wrestling. Thank you that you receive us with kindness through Jesus, and it's in his name. Amen. Thanks for joining us today. We'll continue in Jacob next week. Blessings, and bye-bye.